Yes. Hello, folks. Can people out in chat confirm if they can hear me or not? That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Just so we know everything is right.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Just so we know everything is right.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Just so we know everything is right. Okay, good.
Yep.
Awesome. Just so we know everything. Okay, good. I think it's
Yep.
time for us to go live, and I think it's
Yep.
time for us to go live presentation. I think it's time for
Sweet.
us
Let's do it.
to go live presentation. I think it's time.
Sweet.
So we've been fortunate enough that Frank here from Reptilian Diaries
Hi, everybody.
channel wanted to come and do a talk for us in our little herpetological society here in Denmark. Sort of, not quite in Denmark currently. Frank didn't fly out just to do a stream. I've been told I have double sound. I don't know if that's true. Yeah, I'm going through twice, I've been told. Okay, good.
How is my volume? Is it good? Are we good? Can everybody hear me?
I've heard it's fixed. Anyways, so Frank here wants to do have agreed to do a talk for us on field herping and how it can relate to us as private keepers, and maybe tell us all why we should do it more. And I hope people will enjoy it. The presentation here is in English, but for all the Danish viewers, if you want to ask questions, you can ask them in Danish, and I'll translate them for Frank. And you can ask questions as we go along, and Frank will answer them as they come. And after the presentation, we'll have a few moments for general questions to Frank, both directly to Frank on how the contents of the presentation. So Frank.
Cool. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Frank, and I have been into reptiles and field herping for longer than I'd like to admit, because I feel like I'm getting old, but about 30 years. And yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm honored to have the chance to talk to you guys and to participate in this live stream. And we'll start just kind of with the basics. I'm from the United States. I grew up in California, in Northern California, and just probably like a lot of most people that are into reptiles, I was, out in my backyard probably picking up firewood or raking leaves or something, and all of a sudden I found a salamander or a newt or something like this, and I got excited about it. And my parents were, they nurtured this. They were okay with me looking for, flipping over their flower pots and tearing apart the backyard to find any kind of lizards or amphibians or anything like that I could find. And as luck would have it, my dad owned a pet shop a little bit later. And so I kind of also got to grow up in the pet store. And so my life was kind of inundated with just pets and reptiles and exotic things. I can't remember a time where there wasn't a boa constrictor or a macaw or some type of parrot or fish tank or something in my house. So to me, having a house without that kind of stuff is very foreign. And so I'm just very used to having pets and aquariums and terrariums and this, that, and the other thing. And as I grew older, I never lost that fascination with what's underneath that big log right there. When I'm on a hike, even when I'm with my non-reptile friends, I cannot help myself but to flip the logs when I see them. I will always flip the logs. And my friends are like, what are you doing, man? You're going to get poison oak. You're going to get stung by bees, or there's a rattlesnake under there. And I said, if there's a rattlesnake, then yeah, that's why I'm flipping it. I want to see the rattlesnake. So just always very interested in that kind of stuff. And like I said, it just kind of goes hand in hand with keeping reptiles. And so as I got older, it just started to make more and more sense that I wanted to start seeing these animals that I was seeing in the pet shop and keeping at my house. I wanted to start seeing where these lived and how they lived. And I wanted to see those faraway lands. I think in the beginning, that's why I wanted to keep these animals anyways, is, you know, to have a bearded dragon is to have a tiny little piece of the Australian outback in your living room or in your reptile room or in your bedroom or wherever you keep them. And that, you know, that desire to have that just grew so intense that I wanted to go to these countries and instead of taking the lizard into my living room, I wanted to go into their living room and see what it was like. And so I did. I started to do that. And it in terms of the way that I was keeping my animals, you know, your husbandry techniques, they grow and they get better as you get older and as you get more experienced, as you breed something and then you try a different species and you breed that. And as things go on, you know, you get better and better, but you will never reach your pinnacle until you've actually really went out into the wild and seen how these animals live, because you can learn so much that you'd never see just by reading a book or just by talking to somebody or anything. I mean, the temperature swings that you see in these places, the dryness or the humidity, and just the habitats that these animals live in, it's hard to comprehend until you go and you see them in real life. So that is why, that's really why I travel. That's why I go anywhere. And my wife kind of makes fun of me. She loves it, but we travel a lot, but she knows that wherever we go, there's going to be reptiles there and I'm going to be looking for them. And that's just part of the deal. So she gets to go to these really fun countries, but she has to put up with me disappearing at night and coming back in the early hours of the morning or going on long hikes. So that being said, we're going to jump into a slideshow and go through a bunch of slides that I've taken. That's another thing that's really nice about traveling, is you can really get into photography. You can hone your techniques. You can really have a subject to photograph, because, I mean, once you find these animals, you definitely want to photograph them. And as you find more and more, your photography techniques will get better and better. And so we're going to go into the slideshow and just kind of go through each slide. Valdimar's going to be taking questions. If you guys have any questions, he will take them, and then we will stop and answer the questions. And so before we get into this, are there any questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So we are going to jump in. Christian, is the screen share happening right now?
Yes, everything's working.
All right. So in the very beginning of my travels, I don't want to sound too crazy, but when I first started traveling, I didn't go, you know, really far-flung places. I wanted to start with places that were fairly close to California, or at least the United States, places that I could go fairly quickly and fairly inexpensively. So I started with Central America and also the Caribbean, which to me, to the United States, it's close. I know to Europe, it's quite far. But I also know a lot of Europeans do go to the Caribbean. And so one of the first places I went was Trinidad and Tobago. And I developed quite a strong interest in geckos. That's kind of my main thing, is geckos and lizards. And so going to Trinidad and Tobago was appealing to me because there's a wide range of a certain genus of gecko, which is called gonatodes or gonatodes. And they're very small, but they're very brightly colored, and they're diurnal. So you don't need to go out at night. And Trinidad and Tobago worked on a lot of fronts because it's a tropical island. So it's a beautiful place to be. And it's fairly cheap. Not a ton of people go there. So I felt like I was off the beaten path. And there was nice geckos there. So on the screen right now is kind of a habitat of where you could expect to find reptiles, which is kind of the ruins of a human dwelling, an old house. There's lots of cover, as you can see. Kind of down where I'm standing is a bunch of brick rubble stuff. And no joke, I was flipping these rocks, and I've probably found over 50 of the geckos that I was looking for just right in this pile. And those were Gonatodes vittatus, and this is a female. And for some reason, I did not take a picture of a male, but these guys are, they're very small. They're maybe 5-6 centimeters. And they're appealing to me. They're interesting little animals. They do great in terrariums. A lot of the gecko people are breeding these, and they're just very fun to find in the wild. And it was nice to just see the habitat they're living in, because I was actually thinking that they were more of a strict jungle dwelling animal. But I'll go back really quickly, and this is actually, they like this kind of dryish area. And when I went back into this jungle here in the background, I wasn't finding any. Actually, I was finding a totally different species. And so I changed my keeping techniques to make them a little more dry with more of a sand substrate. And they started breeding better than in like a thick, dense jungle terrarium that I had them in. So that was one thing that I took away from this trip. And that was Gonatodes vittatus. And then back in that jungle was Gonatodes siciliae, which are really beautiful, I mean, striking geckos. And so I think it goes without saying why I wanted to find these. And so these live around the base of these trees. And they kind of, if you come on one side of the tree, they'll skirt around to the other side. So it's easier with two people, because if two people can come to the tree, the gecko will run to the other side, and then that person can see it, and you guys can chase it back and forth until you catch it. But beautiful geckos. This is a male. This is a young male. And so this is the difference. This is another thing I wanted to bring up. This animal, this is a purely wild, in the wild photograph, a wild animal. And if you can see, the colors on this thing are just unreal. And this is an animal that was raised in captivity, UVB lighting, all the good supplements. And it's just, it's crazy the way that just captivity does something to the colors. And it's just interesting to see how bright and crazy nature is, whether it be because of the natural sunlight, the varied diet, the territorial confrontations with other males, or all of the above. I don't know, but it's just interesting to see how bright that is and how dull in comparison that one is. And this is a female of the same species, and this is Gonatodes siciliae. And this is another Gonatodes from these islands. This is Ocellatus. These guys were down in the leaf litter. Not quite as nice, but decent enough. This is another one, Gonatodes humoralis, in the same habitat. And so this goes back to why I went to these islands, because I could find all of these geckos within about 1 hour drive of each other. So I could hit 4 birds with one stone. And then this is the smallest gecko of the islands. This is Spherodactylus moli, very small gecko. These guys are also living in the leaf litter. These are actually pretty rare. And I was happy to find just one. That's all I found the whole trip, was only one. So cute little guys. And then these big guys, which are constantly everywhere. They live in the houses, they're on the roofs, they're everywhere. Thecodactylus rapicauda. These are big geckos. These are 5 inches, 15 centimeters or so, something like that. Big, just beautiful animals. And sorry about that. And then the next trip I went on was to Guanica. Actually, I went to the whole island, but Puerto Rico, which is a very, very, very cool place to hunt reptiles. There's desert, there's jungle, and there's geckos, there's anoles, which are really neat. There's 15 species of anoles. There's, I think, 8 or 10 species of geckos. There's a lot of different frogs. There's a boa constrictor. Beautiful place. And the habitats are very coastal. And most of the geckos I was looking for here were very small Spherodactylus geckos. And they were living down here in this heap of trash. And they were these guys, which were Spherodactylus roosevelti and Spherodactylus nicholsi. And yeah, you could find them on the beach. And as soon as you found them, photograph them, let them go, and then lay on the beach, go swim, have a beer. Life is good. And that's what I like. And so once I kind of got that, I got my traveling feet and I felt comfortable traveling, I started going further and further. And so I started going to Africa, Southern Africa. And South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia are probably 3 of my favorite places in the world. They're very dear to my heart. I love herping them. The animals there are unbelievable. The wildlife there is unbelievable. The scenery there is unbelievable. So this is Spitzkoppe, Namibia. This is in kind of central northern Namibia. Just a giant, giant, giant rocky mountain. And I was specifically looking for some geckos here. This was one of them. This is Pachydactylus bicolor. And this is, so let me go back real quick. So one thing about hunting reptiles that's very kind of important is understanding microhabitats. And in this photograph, there's 3 general microhabitats that you would have. You'd have up here at the top, which this is kind of the upper mountain habitat. And there would be a specific group of reptiles living here in the top. You have this middle area. There will be a specific species of reptiles that are living in this middle area that are not at the top and that are not at the bottom. And then you have down here at the bottom where you have a whole nother specific group. And so if I didn't know this and I didn't understand this, I could come to this mountain and say, well, I'm looking for giant sand geckos, Chondrodactylus angullifer, or you know, Afroedura africana, which is an African flat gecko. And if I was walking around down here in the flats looking for African flat geckos, I would never find them, even though I was within, you know, a kilometer of them, because they're very common up here. And it would be the same thing for Chondrodactylus angullifer. I could technically be in the habitat, but if I'm up here, if I'm even up in these small rocks, I will not find them. I need to be down on the flats. So that's another thing traveling will help you do. It'll help you really understand the microhabitat of the species that you're looking for. So these Pachydactylus bicolor, they were kind of in this middle area, in these kind of large broken up boulders. And Pachydactylus punctatus, they were down on the flat sand. And like I just said, you would not find these in the rocks. And Pachydactylus bicolor, you would not find them down in the sand. Varanas albiguillaris, this is a big monitor lizard, and you would not find these guys up near the top, but you would most certainly find these guys down at the bottom in the sandy, kind of right up against the rocky base areas, cruising around hunting for other lizards, other snakes, and stuff like that. And this Chondrodactylus angullifer, so this is the habitat shot, and if you can look back here in the background, this is the Spitzkopf, this is that mountain. And so in this sandy flat area is where you can find these giant sand geckos. And this is a true, so if any of the listeners know about Chondrodactylus angullifer, there's 2 subspecies. There's angullifer angullifer and there's angullifer namibiensis. And a lot of kind of drama surrounds angullifer namibiensis because a lot of people label angullifer as namibiensis just because they look a little bit different. And that's not the case. True namibiensis, this is a true namibiensis. They have a white tipped tubercle. Every single tubercle is white tipped. They're larger than angullifer. They're very lanky. So if you keep angullifer, if you saw a namibiensis, a true one, there would be no question whether it was, it wouldn't be like, oh, I wonder if this is namibiensis or if this is angullifer. There would be no question. That was just a side note. And so then these guys, of course, microhabitat situation, you'll never find these guys up in the rocks. Not this species. There are tortoises that do live in the rocks, Homopus and stuff like that. But the Stigmocheles, which is the leopard tortoise, these guys do not climb the rocks. These guys are down in the sand. And these guys are pretty common throughout southern Africa. This was a pretty large species, pretty large specimen. And then this is one of my favorite geckos. These are the barking geckos, Tenepus garrulus maculatus. These guys live in burrows in very, very dense colonies, and they bark. And it can literally sound like you're standing in the middle of a field of crickets. Sometimes it's so loud that you almost can't hear somebody talking to you, you know, a couple feet away. So they're charismatic, beautiful little geckos, and they live in the sandy flats of Namibia and southern Africa. And I've kept and bred these guys. They're pretty popular with the rare gecko crowd, and you can see why. They're comical little animals. And then in the trees, which is kind of another microhabitat, you find chameleons, which is, I mean, it's always really cool to find a chameleon. I think this was actually my first chameleon that I ever found in the wild. And that's the flapneck chameleon, Cameleo dilepis. And they will live just in these bottom little trees down here. Best way to find them is at night. If you have the balls for it, go out at night. This is a scary place to go out at night because there's a lot of leopards here. There's a lot of spotted hyenas here. So it can be nerve-wracking to go at night, but as long as you have a couple people with you, you should be okay. But you can shine your flashlight to these trees And at night, the chameleons, they sleep out on the very tips of the branches, and they kind of reflect your light. So it's very easy to find them at night. In the daytime, I've never found one in the daytime. And a different, going south, we hit a different habitat, which is Swakop in Namibia. These are the coastal, they call them quartz gravel plains. And there's some very just alien, strange looking little geckos that live in these plains. And this is Tenopus carpi and Pachydactylus koki. And this area, so this is a perfect example of how, if I kept these fragile looking geckos in captivity, I would be so worried about temperature swings and humidity. I would be like, my gosh, never let it go below 80 degrees or, 28 degrees Celsius. Never let it go above 30 degrees Celsius. This area gets downright freezing cold at night. I'm talking 4 or 5 degrees Celsius at night. Every night, the wind comes blowing through. It gets very foggy and it's cold every night. And these little geckos are just sitting out there. It's crazy how something so fragile could handle such just a brutal climate. And here's just another photo of Tenopus carpi. This is just another species of that barking gecko. And then this is one of the rarest snakes in Southern Africa. I was very excited to find this. This is Lamprofus Fisky. When we found this snake, I think there had only been maybe 6 ever found. And so this was a very big deal for us. Since then, there's been quite a few more. People are starting to find them more. They're starting to understand, like I said before, they're starting to understand the microhabitat. And that's why this snake was considered so rare, is because the microhabitat was not understood. And they were found over such a large area. There'd be one found, in one place, and then another one found 300 kilometers distance, and then another one found 600 kilometers south, and nothing between, and it just wasn't making sense. But now people are starting to understand that it's a big range. They're very microhabitat specific, and once you nail that microhabitat down, you have a much better chance of finding them. It's a beautiful little snake, though. And these guys are just pretty common throughout Southern Africa. This is Bitis caudalis. This is a dwarf adder. These guys are related to the larger puff adders and gaboon vipers from sub-Saharan Africa. So beautiful snakes, very cool, very variable. You find red ones, orange ones, gray ones, yellow ones, very neat. And then my own backyard, pretty much. This is the deserts of California, where I go quite a bit when I can't get out of the country, which has been lately because of COVID. So spend a lot of time down in the desert. This is where I kind of cut my teeth reptile hunting. Some beautiful scenery, and everybody loves the little Coleonyx variegatus. These are our little local banded geckos. We can go out and these guys are super common, find tons of them, but I still love them. I keep these guys, I breed them. They're super cool little animals. And then we've got our rattlesnakes that live around here, which we love finding these guys. I guess these guys are probably like, European Vipera, stuff like that. So these guys you could find in a field 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. This is Crotalus helleri. This is the Southern Pacific rattlesnake. And then we do have our other gecko species. This is Phylodactylus nauticolus. This is a leaf-toed gecko, which lives in these rocks. They hide in these cracks. And it's interesting to see the way that geckos they live so similar. You could find a gecko that looked just like this, lived in the exact same habitat in Australia, in the Middle East, in Africa, and in the Americas. It's just a trip how just how similar they are. And then here's the two of my favorite rattlesnakes in the United States. Everybody knows Crotalus atrox. That's the Western diamondback rattlesnake. That's the typical pose they'll make. And then we've got Crotalus ruber, which is the red diamond rattlesnake. Beautiful snakes. Both of them are local to me. And then here's the sidewinder, Crotalus cerastes. These guys are known for their crazy sidewinding motion. And just in one of my recent videos, we went down and found all of the, in San Diego County, we have 4 native rattlesnakes, and we went down and found all of them in 2 nights, which was a goal of mine. So it was pretty cool. This is a photo from that video. My most recent trip was Western Australia, and this was at the very beginning of 2020. We snuck this in right before COVID happened. And this is Shark Bay. This is probably one of the coolest places I've been. Just absolutely beautiful. amazing reptiles, very chilled place to be. And this is Nephrus levis pilbarensis. This is a knobtail gecko. I'm sure a lot of people watching this will know what this is. These are a favorite in gecko and reptile people, and these were just a pleasure to see. They were just, I mean, it was one of the top species on the list, and we did see them, so we were very happy. And of course, the black-headed python, Aspedites melanocephalus. We found 2 of these guys. No, we've actually found 3. One was dead, 2 live ones on the trip. Stunning snakes. This was a baby. This was the first one we found. And we had actually basically given up on herping that night. And my buddy Greg, he had to use the bathroom. So we had stopped, and he had just walked out to take a leak out in the bush, and boom, this thing was just sitting right there. So thank God for that.
Hey, Frank, we have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever went out looking for sea snakes, or just encountered them by chance?
I have encountered the yellow-bellied sea snake in Costa Rica. I was not looking for them. I was actually fishing. And there was one in the harbor. And that was really I believe that was the only sea snake I've ever seen. And was that the only? Yeah, that was the only sea snake I've ever seen. And I mean, most sea snakes, I don't know why, I'm not super interested in sea snakes for some reason. Maybe it's because I haven't seen them. I'm not sure. I don't know why. I need to actually look into that more. But yeah, I've never gone after sea snakes, but that's actually a very good, I should go after sea snakes. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, you can definitely see them in, I know, Indonesia. I found them myself.
Yeah.
The secret
and that's
on the beach at night.
Yeah, the one place I really have not been is Southeast Asia. So that's kind of on the list. And yeah, sea snakes. I do need to look into those, because even like when I'm looking at my books and stuff, that's always a section that I'm kind of just like, and I skip past it, but I shouldn't, because they're cool.
I'm sure Robin that asked that question can help you out.
Yeah.
Figuring out where to go.
Okay.
He has some experience with sea snakes.
Well, friend request me, and let's talk about sea snakes. So Australia, black-headed pythons. This was a very, not a very small one, but this was about 2 feet, so about probably 0.75 meters. Just a beautiful young snake. Really stoked to see this. And then about maybe a half hour later, we drove up on a big, probably a 2-meter adult, which was just incredible. And that's in one of the Western Australia videos. If you guys check those videos out, you can see video footage of all this Australian stuff. And then this was probably the find of the trip, because in Shark Bay, the Woma is incredibly rare and they're incredibly beautiful. And we didn't think we were going to find one. And obviously we did. And it was just incredible. And it was so crazy, because you spend so much time hunting and just off the beaten path and just working hard for these animals. And then you're driving back, and you got to watch the video on this one, because literally in the background, like, so we had hunted all day, all night for this damn thing. On the way back, I mean, we were literally pulling into town. You can see city lights, and this thing's sitting in the road in town. It was crazy. We had wasted so much time out in the back, and then this thing's just waiting for us as we got home. Beast of a snake, absolutely beautiful. Aspedites ramsayi, the Woma. And then these are very common out there. Rhynchiodura ornata, very beautiful. They're called beaked geckos, and they're just beautiful little guys. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. And then the Stimson's python. This is one of the smaller species of python in the world. These guys are common throughout Western Australia. These guys are actually common throughout a lot of Australia. And this was one of the highlights of the trip, because I really wanted to see them. I've kept these in the past. And we were at a place called Carragini, and we saw plenty of them. So we were stoked. I actually want to get a pair of these again. It's funny, because I haven't kept Australian pythons for years, and now I have a very bad itch to get Australian pythons again. That's another thing that herping will do to you, is you'll see animals out there that you really didn't have a desire to keep in captivity, and all of a sudden you will have a strong desire to keep them in captivity.
What's the worst itch you ever gotten from herping in the field?
The what?
What's the strongest itch you ever had from herping in the field? Like, you got home from a trip and you're
had
like,
to keep
I need
something?
this now.
Let's see. I mean, there's probably Oman, going to Oman, and seeing the Euromastics and coming home and just saying, yeah, yes, that's happening immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably Euromastics and Oman. I mean, well, actually, no, there is one other thing. I was in very extreme northern Namibia. We found an Angolan Python, which is a very rare snake to find in the wild. And I came home, and I think within a month of me getting home, I had a pair of Angolan Pythons. And then I realized, you know what? I don't really like these. And then I got rid of them, but I had to have them after finding one in the wild. So this is Strophoris ciliaris. These guys are pretty popular in the gecko trade. As you can see why. And this is a very, very, no offense to this specimen, but this is an ugly one. These things can be really crazy colored. Oranges and reds and whites and blacks. Really crazy. They've got spikes on the tail. They actually shoot a nasty little liquid out of their tails that's sticky and smells funny. They're beautiful geckos. They're pretty common. And yeah, just really neat animals.
Nicholas is asking if what subspecies that one is.
This one is aberrans, because this is up. Yeah, this is
exactly what he.
Yeah, this is up north. Sorry, I didn't put the subspecies. But yeah, this is aberrans. This is this was in this is near Port Hedland, which is at the very northern top end of Western Australia. And then this was a fun one. Of course, if you ever go to Australia, you want to find a thorny devil, the Moloch. And we had looked high and low for them. And this is, I guess, how herping works. Looked all over from the whole trip, couldn't find them, gave up, driving home. We're not even in the desert anymore, literally not in the desert at all. We're down like in almost the farmlands, getting back down to Perth. And sure enough, this guy runs across the road. I thought we hit him. We straddled him. I scream like a woman. My buddy Greg pulls over. I jump out. Another car is flying. I stop that. I wave my hand so the cars, I think they went around me or something. Grabbed this guy up off the road, and it was so cool to find one of these. It's a bucket list species. This was actually, we thought we'd find a lot more of these, but we only found this one baby. And when I was photographing it, it escaped. So I was the only one who got a photograph of it. And this was the only crappy photograph I got of it. This is Varanas hammerslayensis. Some of you might know Varanas pilbarensis, which looks very similar. Pilbarensis is from the west end of the Hammersley Mountains, and hammerslayensis is from the east end of the Hammersley Mountains. So I don't know how recent the split was. I think it was within the last couple of years, but this is hammerslayensis, and this is a baby. Absolutely gorgeous animal. They live in the gorges, and if you ever go there and want to find them, get up very early in the morning and get out there before it gets too hot, because once it gets hot, you can't find them. They're not there. And a lot of people love these. I love these. This was one of the bucket list items for the trip. This is a Gurnia depressa. These guys live in the trees, and we found a lot of these guys. They're comical little animals. A lot of my buddies keep these and breed them. Neat to see them in captivity, or neat to see them in the wild. I had a buddy with me who keeps these almost exclusively. So he was, taking detailed notes about temperatures and humidity and taking photos of how they hide, and totally redesigned his setups, and doing well with them. Just really cool little animals. A Gurnia depressa. And then the UAE, I've been fortunate enough to, some of my German friends are very into going to Oman and the United Arab Emirates, and they've brought me along with them on a lot of trips. And so I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of the herpetofauna from these areas. And this is the United Arab Emirates. Very easy place to travel, very cool animals. It's a quick trip from Europe. So those of you guys who are listening who like field herping, the UAE is a good spot to start, especially just to get comfortable with kind of the Middle East and Muslim countries and stuff like that. Very good spot. Sorry about that. It's my dog. Hey, pet it. And just beautiful scenery, crazy sand dunes. You could take photos of this kind of stuff for days. And kind of the star of the show there for me is Teratoscincus kaiserlingi, which is a big gecko. These guys are mostly known from Iran. but they do range just kind of way up in the northwest of the Emirates. There's a little population of them, and it's 100% worth going and seeing them. I can't wait to go and see them again. And this is a baby. And then Euromastics aegyptia, just big honking monsters. These things can get up to almost close to a meter long, and I think like 8 to 10 pounds or something. They're beasts of lizards. They're herbivores, and they're not that easy to find for how big they are. You'd think they'd be easy, but they live kind of, you find these tiny little sandstony rocky crap that's sticking out of the sand, and they live there. And these guys were actually kind of in a weird park setting. There was a horse race track or a camel race track nearby, and people would come out and dump. I think they were feeding them. They would dump this green stuff, and these dudes would just hang around there. You got a male over here with the big black head, and you got a female over here. Just a treat to see these animals. A lot of people keep these in captivity, and like I said, being able to stand in this habitat, you would glean a lot of information on how to keep them. Most people, they just go on and on and on about how Euromastics, you got to keep them so dry, the humidity, blah, 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 blah. The Emirates is incredibly humid. It's a desert, but the reason why the Emirates is a desert is because the sand is, it's poor soil. It's not that there's no humidity in the air. It's that there's nothing that can grow there. It's probably 70 to 80% humidity right here. It's extremely hot and extremely humid. So take that into consideration with Euromastics.
Hey, Frank.
These are tiny, tiny little geckos. Very, very, very delicate looking guys.
Frank,
and
we have a little delayed question.
Okay.
Christian, our producer here, is asking, how did you end up having Depressa, and how did you set them up after seeing them in the wild? Did it change?
I have not kept Depressa, but I don't want to say all of my friends, but a lot of my friends keep Depressa, and they actually were keeping them more like stacked rocks with some cork bark and stuff like that. And once they saw how these animals are not living in the rocks at all, not at all, they set them up more with cork tubes, not even slabs of cork, actual tubes of cork, hollow logs. That is 100% how they live. They don't live any other way. They don't live in anything other than like holes in trees and hollowed out branches. And I think that's also how they started to differentiate the species. You've got Agurnia depressa, you've got Agurnia epsisolus, Agurnia signitos, and Agurnia eos. And signitos, epsisolus, and eos, they're all rock-dwelling species. But then you've got Depressa, which is a strictly tree wood-dwelling species. And so learning that, you take that into your captive husbandry, and you can just, sure, they'll breed if you keep them in rocks, but it's just so much more natural to keep them in wood. So Stenodactylus arabicus, these guys they're very similar to the web-footed geckos from Namibia, palmetto gecko, but it's just that divergent thing. They're totally separate continent and living very, very similar. Pretty cool. And then these guys, Pseudoceramodactylus cobarensis. This is like an alien little gecko that live in the most inhospitable, sand flat, muddy crap that you've ever seen. It's amazing that something even exists in this. I'm sure the first person to discover these was probably like these guys that like discovered that there's snails living in like, these volcanic craters that are 6,000 degrees. It makes no sense that these animals can live where they do, but they do. And just a very interesting gecko. This was one of our targets, and we found them, so we're very happy. And then to the snakes, Cerastes gasparetti. Watch where you're walking, obviously, because they'll do that and they'll just sit there, and you want to be careful. These guys they're toxic. They won't kill you, but they're fairly dangerous, and they're very common, and they sit just like this photo. So if you're ever out there walking around at night in the sand, don't do what I do, because I wear flip-flops, and that's a terrible idea. And then the sand boas, really cool snakes. So with snakes out in the sand dunes in the Emirates, all you got to do is you go out there at night with a flashlight. There's tracks all over the place, and you find a track, and you start following that track. And sometimes 5 minutes later, you come up on a snake. Sometimes 30 minutes later, you come up on a snake. But if you follow the track long enough, you will come up on a snake. Oh, Swaziland. This was in Africa. Just absolutely beautiful, weird habitat. We were looking for certain geckos here. There was also a lot of wildlife here, which was really neat. And the habitat was just cool. It was very cool. This is what we were looking for. This is Haemophilus wahlbergi. This is a large gecko. And once again, we were looking for him out in those rocks. Couldn't find them. And we come back to our guest house, and there they are on the walls. And these little guys were pretty cool. These were little day geckos. And frogs basking in the sun was strange, but it was cool to see these. And then these were the target species, Afroidura, which is an African flat gecko. And these guys, once we nailed that microhabitat that I've been talking about, we found a lot of them. But we didn't find any until we nailed that microhabitat. You had to be at the very top of those mountains in the previous couple pictures, the very top. Nowhere else. These guys are at the very top. Once you get to the very top, there they are. Here is Oman. Let me grab a phone charger really quickly because my phone's losing steam.
All good, Frank.
So Oman is a wonderful place. All right. Sorry about that. All right, so Oman, like, definitely one of the favorite places I've ever been. Just everything about it is foreign and beautiful and amazing and just crazy, just absolutely crazy. It's hard to even explain the culture shock and it's just crazy. I love it. I love it. I can't wait to go back. Big wadis, just windswept islands out in the middle of the Persian Gulf, crazy deserts, camels everywhere, which are really cool, really weird animals. Very cool geckos. We wrote an article about these guys. These guys were one of the rarest geckos in Oman, and we disproved that and wrote a nice article. Big Teodactylus dofarensis. These are fan-toed geckos. And then the Euromastics, just absolutely epic. This is Euromastics benti. They live right up on the coast in the rocks. And yeah, once I saw these, I needed Euromastics. These are not in captivity. They're not available, so I couldn't get these, but I got my hands on some other Euromastics, and I've just had a lot of fun with them. They love the heat. I mean, they love the heat. The second it gets under about probably 28 degrees Celsius, they go in. It's too cold for them. It's insane how much these heat-loving lizards, they're nuts. And then the vipers, Echis shoreki. These guys are responsible for a lot of bites in the Middle East. And I was actually expecting them to be just nasty snakes, and they're not that nasty. They're pretty placid, actually. I thought they were going to be much more nasty than they were, but very mellow snakes. They're out at night, and you just got to watch for them. This is kind of a bycatch of looking for geckos, but it's a very welcome bycatch. These are more cerastes. This is a horned version, but like once again, and you'll see these Muslim dudes walking around out in this desert barefoot at night without a flashlight. It's like, well, no wonder you guys get bit. Like what? Like, it's crazy. Look at that head on that thing. It's like a pit bull. Crazy. Stenodactylus lepticals and bodies. This is a big gecko from Oman. Beautiful animals, very variable. The gecko people love these. This is Prosturus carteri. This is the scorpion tail gecko, I think is what they call them. These are diurnal and nocturnal. Find them in the day and the night, and they're just very comical, very charismatic little geckos. They're very common, and I always stop to take photos of them just because they're so cool.
Hey Frank, we have another question.
Yep. Okay.
Do you have any experience, either captive or in the wild, with the Nephris asper or amii? And have you
with Nephris?
Yes.
I have experience with
specifically.
I have experience with Amia, not in the wild, but in captivity. And Asper, I do not have experience either way. A close friend of mine breeds Asper. He was actually with me in Australia. His name's Hussam. He breeds Asper. And we do have a trip tentatively planned to head up to Queensland area to find Asper. But we have not yet. I hope to do that because that is
Cool
that's a cool gecko.
I
What's
happen
that?
to have found them quite a few
I was
times.
going to say, I think you found him, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's,
They're,
yeah, you got me on that one.
They're weird. They live in these very specific microhabitat where they don't leave like an area that's like 10 by 10 meters. They
Yeah,
stay
exactly.
around rocks of a certain size. They have to be like under like 2 meters in diameter and more than half a meter in diameter. So big rocks they can hide under, but not too big. And
Yes,
then they just go there and they don't.
And you never find them if you didn't know that microhabitat.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And now I know that. So now that's in here. So when I go there, I'll be looking for those rocks. Here's another photo of that crazy gecko living out in the muddy plains. You can even see down on its feet. Like it's literally this salty mud crap. It's crazy the way these guys live. And this is Stenodactylus doriae, another gecko from there. This is Sharikensis. This is a new species. And these are similar to Arabicus, which we saw a few slides back. And then these guys are like probably like the fan favorite of Oman. This is Euromastics Tomasi. Just ridiculous, like such a weird animal. And look at that habitat. Like, what do they eat? Do they eat rocks? Like, there's no bushes. Literally, what do they eat? They must eat seeds, or maybe like when it rains once every 100 days, like little sprouts come out and they just eat everything and then not eat for a few days. But there's nothing for them to eat. It's crazy. But really, really, really neat animals. And then we found this cobra. This is also in Oman. Very cool. This is an Arabian Cobra. Tropiocolotes, CF scortechi. The CF is because right now this species is kind of under review. Me and a friend Mickey, who some of you might know, he's a German guy. We've traveled out to these islands, and then he has also done some other work in other areas, along with a couple other German friends. And we found quite a few different Tropiocolotes scortechi-like animals. And so there's being a lot of work done to figure this out. This particular animal is out on an island. So chances are this will be a new species at some point.
Frank, we have another question.
Okay.
The Cobarensis, what substrate did you find them in? Is it dry and moist? Like Nicholas is trying to figure out how they lay their eggs.
Well, I mean, they live on this, it's hard to even explain. Well, it's basically like a salt flat. And it's got this crust that when you walk, you'll sink into this very salty, crusty, at times wet. It's very humid. It's right on the coast generally. I'm talking like within 100 meters of the water sometimes. And so it's very humid, but it's dry. It's very hard to explain. I mean, if you're breeding Pseudoceramodactylus, it's a hard-shelled egg. So what you should do is you should incubate them in a dry substrate in a very humid incubator. So I would say maybe have them in a deli cup with perlite or vermiculite or whatever you would use to incubate like a Nephrus egg or a soft-shelled egg, but have the Cobarensis eggs on a cap of like dry sand. You should not have them in a wet substrate, if that answers your question. Okay, so this is Tropiocolotes Confucius. This is a new species. This was found by, I believe, Salvador Carranza. We found these species as well. Very beautiful little animals. I think the species is maybe 1 or maybe 2 years old. Cool stuff. This is another. So here's why these are CF scortechi. So this animal right now is the same species as this animal, but it's also, as you can tell, it's very different. So that's why they're being worked on right now. And this is just some of the habitats in Oman. This is Alain, a lot of animals in these canyons. Pristurus, this is a day active gecko. This is related to Pristurus carteri. This guy's, I just actually noticed this guy is missing a foot here, which is interesting. And then we've got Pristurus galligari. These guys live in trees. Asacus platyrhynchus. This is one of my favorite species. Big, beautiful, colorful, just a strange animal. Love finding these things. I've kept these guys and bred them. They're rare in captivity. I think the German guys keep them a little more than the Americans. I only know maybe one or two American guys keeping these. I'm not sure if you guys are doing it up there, but they're worth it. They're very neat. This is Belize. This was actually a very long time ago, but a very rewarding trip. This up here, this is Drymarchon. This is a black-tailed cribo. We've got a Gulf Coast toad here. This is Spherodactylus glaucus. This is some species of an anole, I'm not sure. This is Aristelager georgiensis, who a buddy in Italy is breeding these, and some guys in the US are breeding them. And this is a Atlantic milk snake, which is actually a rare Lampropeltis, but I somehow dumb luck found one. There was actually a herpetologist, I believe Bob Henderson was down staying where I was staying when I found this animal, and I had told him I had found it, and he made a big deal about it. And that's when I realized that it was rare, because this was, I think this trip was 2006. So this was quite a while ago. I was just kind of still getting my feet wet with the field herping. Ecuador, this was my first time in South America. Little Lepidoblepharis, cool little geckos. They're related to Spherodactylus. Another Lepidoblepharis, grandis, pretty neat animals. And then Corallus bloombergi. This is the Choco Tree Boa. Very rewarding animal to find. Very photographic animal. Yeah, super cool. Also, I don't know if anyone's into plants, but man, I've been tripping out on these plants in the background. I'm very into philodendron and anthurium and monstera plants, and I wasn't when I went on this trip, and now I'm looking at these leaves like, oh man, what are these? But there's some cool plants in the background there. This is Anolis proboscis. This was obviously one of the goals of the trip, and we did manage to find this young male. He's not fully adult, so that nasal appendage is not quite as big as it could be, but man, look at that. That's such a cool lizard. And then we also wanted to find this. This is Basilicus Galeritas. You see a lot of Basilicus plumiforms and Vitatus in captivity, but these, very neat. I mean, look at this appendage up here, like this, whatever the heck you'd call that, little head crest. Is very neat animals. And then my favorite iguanid of tropical South America is Analioides, and this is Analioides altotombo. We found altotombo, we found O'Shaughnessy, and we found heteroderma or heterolepis. Can't remember, one of those. But they're very cryptic animals. They don't typically run; they'll just freeze and they hold on, and they're damn near impossible to find. We searched. I mean, we were there for 11 days every night on the trails, and we found 2 of them. Bothriechis sledgely. This is everybody's favorite little viper, the eyelash viper. Super variable, pretty common, very rewarding. These guys live in the trees, and they are generally doing the same thing we're doing. They're hunting lizards. This is Botswana. This was another old trip, me thinking that I'm cool. We've got Tenepus. These are barking geckos, and this is Pachydaculus, which used to be Colopus wahlbergi. Both of these guys live in the ground, on the sand. And yeah, this was my first experience with lions and leopards, and not having a guide, and just kind of how you deal with those kind of situations. So that was a fun trip. This is South Africa. This is up on the very top of a mountain. we were looking for a very beautiful gecko, which I think is on the next slide. Nope, still looking. I wish this picture was the big version. Do I have the big version? I don't. So this is, I'm like very high up. So this is the ground here, but it's very steep, and I'm I'm up a ways looking for an Afroidura, which we found, which this is one of my all-time favorite geckos of any country ever. And this is Afroidura hawaiiensis. And these are not small, these are big. These are the size of, like Valdemar, you don't know, these are the size of any Oidura you found, or bigger. They're big. And they actually look like an Oidura from Australia. But they're from South Africa. Absolutely beautiful. Stay on there. And this is just more of the way, this was on the way up. So this was another, so that last gecko was another example of microhabitat. You had to get way up on the top of the mountain to find them. Otherwise, you wouldn't find them. This is Afro Gecko porphyreus, another just a very common gecko in South Africa, but something that's almost never seen, you know, in captivity or just even by the rare gecko guys. Like, they don't talk about these. Swartberg Mountains, more geckos, Pachydaculus geicha and Hogia huety. So this was just kind of a gecko trip. These are Pachydaculus. Pachydaculus are a crazy genus of gecko. There's just so many of them. And then Rami gecko swartbergensis, which is another very rare gecko, only from the very top of that mountain. But down at the bottom, you find Chondrodactylus angulifer, which is the giant sand gecko. And then down kind of at the base of these mountains and in the surrounding areas, you start to find another very favorite of people is the Ouroboros cataphractus or Cordylus cataphractus. This is the armadillo lizard. This is the habitat of them. They live kind of in these shale cracks and underneath these big flakes alongside of Pachydaculus weberi. Another thing about habitat is it gets very cold here. This is kind of a coastal, I mean, it's a coastal mountainside, and so it gets fog and wind, and those cataphractus, they can handle some cold temperatures, no doubt. This is back up in Namibia, Pachydaculus rugosus. I know a lot of guys keep these. Beautiful, very neat little geckos. This is another giant Pachydaculus gaiacensis. And so we were camping out here. This is in the Skeleton Coast. And I'm actually I'm not in my tent, but I'm standing at the door of my tent right here with maybe a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. So these giraffes they were checking us out. And that was a crazy night, just a crazy night. There was lions roaring in the background. There was hyenas running around. It was terrifying, but it was amazing. And this was actually one of the very first pictures I think I ever have seen of the Lygodactylus lawrencei, which is pretty cool. This is just I mean, they're so remote that I wouldn't say they're rare, but just there was no photos of them. So it was cool to be able to photograph those. And the giraffes here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess there's 4, but it was really cool to wake up and just have giraffes kicking it, like right by your tent. And like I said, this is not a safari. There's no guides. Nobody has guns. There's nobody there except for me and my buddies out in the middle of the Skeleton Coast, just camping. Just whatever happens, happens. And this is an undescribed species of Pachydaculus, and this is a very gnarly area. There was just a really crazy night one night with, like I said in the last one, there was elephants and lions and probably a little bit too much rum, and shit got a little weird, but we found the geckos and escaped with our lives. So that was a fun one. A couple more geckos in this little area. And we're nearing the end. And so one thing about field herping is go with friends. And it's memories that will last forever. This is my good friend, Greg. He's been all around the world with me. Here he is down in Southern California. Here he is in Namibia. Here he is in Ecuador. He's been with me to Australia. And this is my wife, Jessica. She was with me in Ecuador. This is a buddy, Sean Harrington, my buddy Mike. We're in Ecuador here. This is Mickey and me down fishing in Oman. My buddy Paul in Southern California. It's a great place to be with your friends. I mean, if you have friends that are like-minded that want to go out and hunt reptiles, there's nothing better to do than to do just that. And even if you have friends that are into keeping reptiles but have never hunted reptiles, I mean, now is the time to say, hey, buddy, let's go on a hike, man. Let's go look for something. I mean, Denmark or Germany or wherever you guys live, I know you have I mean, I've herped in Europe. I've gone looking for Podarcus. I've gone looking for down into northern Italy to find geckos. I've driven, I was telling Valdemar, I've driven from Kiel, which is basically almost Denmark, straight down to Milan and Genoa, Italy, to find geckos and to find lacerdas. And so, I mean, you guys in Europe you guys are kind of right there where you need to be, especially, I mean, you can herp locally, but you guys have a jump off point to herp Africa, to herp the Middle East. I mean, Turkey would be amazing. Even a lot of the Eastern European countries are just absolute fire. Plus, even Western, you got Portugal and Spain. I mean, you guys have an amazing opportunity to do some epic herping. And I know a lot of you guys are. So keep that up because I'm coming over there to do it. Just a couple more photos. Oman, fishing, little meerkat that was semi-wild, giving him a little kiss. Here's some camels, and always bring your camera. Always be prepared. You know, pack all your lenses because you never know what you're gonna see. I've definitely underpacked and I've overpacked, but I'd rather overpack because you know when you show up and you've got like a couple slides back, a bunch of giraffes out in front of your tent, and all you have is a wide-angle lens. It's not going to work. You got to have your lenses, and you got to be ready for whatever comes your way. And that is the end of the slideshow. So, I mean, that kind of wrapping up. It's to me, keeping reptiles and going and seeing reptiles. It's not even two things. It's one thing. It's just that's the lifestyle. You keep reptiles, and when you have time off of work, you go and hunt reptiles. Like that's literally how my mind works. I mean, of course I spend time with my family and my friends and everything like that. But when I get off work, I feed my reptiles. I look at Google Maps. I look at Google Earth. I look at all of I think I have about 500 or 600 books. I talk to my friends about travel. I'm looking at PDFs. I'm planning trips. I mean, COVID has really been a nightmare because I don't even know like where to begin. I mean, I do. I have a trip. I'm actually going to Baja in 2 weeks. We're going to drive down to Baja to look for rosy boas, Baja rat snakes, Coleonyx swataki. We're going to go fishing, bring the family, going with some reptile friends. And that'll be my first like real herping trip since COVID. And then from then it's hopefully, you know, vaccine, no vaccine, however you feel about that situation, it's time to start living again. And time to start herping again. So I think that's all I got. Do we have some questions?
We do. I wanted to do a big applause here, but I think it's always a bit sad when it's solo. But we do have some questions.
Okay, let's do it.
Klaus is asking about how does one plan a herping trip to Australia? Do you need permits and stuff? And
so
put up your tent where you want.
Well, for Australia, so it's kind of a gray area in terms of I digress. So right off the bat, no, you don't need permits. All of my trips are planned the same exact way. I grab a field guide. I decide what I want to see. Australia's as you know, Valdemar, Australia is a massive continent, so you can't just go to Australia. You need to decide where you're going to go in Australia. You've got, I mean, you got to kind of decide what you want to see, you know, because if you want to see Nephrus wheeleri and Stropharis taenacata, it's not going to happen in one trip. It's just not, unless you're going to be there forever and just spend the entire time in the car. Those are on two separate sides of the continent. So you need to decide kind of what you want to see. And once you decide what you want to see, you can kind of plan your trip around that. So generally, let's say that I wanted to see Nephrus wheeleri. I'd grab the guidebook and I'd say, so Nephrus wheeleri, where are these guys? Okay, they're in like they're in the central portion of Western Australia. Okay, Western Australia. Where's the airport? Airport is Perth. Okay, let's check the flights. We check the flights. From California to Perth is about $1,000. Okay, so I need to start putting that money together. Now let's see what else I can find around that area. And I mean, it just kind of, it blossoms from there. You pinpoint a couple of species. You check the flight prices. You check the car rental prices, and you get friends together, because that just makes it more fun. Going on a field trip and hit by yourself, I don't know. I don't do it. I mean, I'll go local, like on a hike or something, but I've never gone far by myself. But you want to just get you want to get everything loosely planned. You don't need to have this crazy strict like itinerary where it's like every single day you've got all these stops planned out. You want to have a loose plan, and you kind of just roll with it, and you learn. The beginning's a little sketchy. You're like, well, shit, I don't know what time how long this is going to take or what's going to happen. And you learn pretty quickly. Like in our situation, and in Australia and Africa, these roadhouses and these guest houses, they shut down quick. This is not some city shit. They close early. Like when it gets dark, you need to have your stuff lined up. Otherwise you're going to be sleeping in the car. And we learned that fairly quickly. We did get stranded one night and just literally had to camp on the side of the road. Because the gas stations as well, they close early. So you need to take that stuff into consideration. But Google Earth is your friend. The field guides are your friend. iNaturalist can help you out. Get on the maps. See how far you're comfortable with driving. Time it out. Map it out. See how much time you have. You know, if you can start in Perth, try to figure out, well, if I go to Perth, okay, Paynes Find is the beginning of wheeleri habitat. It's about a 4-hour drive. From Paynes Find, how far can I go here? Where can I go here? How much time do I have? Plan it out. In terms of holding and bothering reptiles and amphibians in Western Australia, I don't know about the rest of the continent, but Western Australia, it's technically a no-no to molest any reptile. That being said, I mean, we photograph the reptiles. We don't hurt them. We send them on their way. I am absolutely not just going to stand by while an animal gets hit by a car or something like that. I'm going to pick them up and move them off the road. That's how I am. If they want to give me a ticket for it, then fucking give me a ticket for it. Excuse my language. But you don't want to take animals anywhere. Don't put them in a deli cup and save them for a photograph later. Don't transport them anywhere. That's a bad idea. In Australia, other countries, it's not a big deal. In Australia, you find the animal, take your photos, let it go, let it move on its way, and do your thing. That's kind of the deal with Australia. Don't make a big deal about what you're doing. You know, don't be traipsing around through the bushes and stuff in front of a lot of people. Just be chill about it. Be mindful. Understand that a lot of people are going to think that you're trying to smuggle reptiles. And so just be chill about it. Have your camera with you. Don't ever like put an animal in a deli cup. And you'll be fine.
So I can maybe pitch in a little bit, having herped in Australia quite a bit.
Okay.
So in Queensland, where I was, most places you want to camp, like in national parks, or they have these sites, especially in the jungle. They have these sites set up. You can camp at. You have to have a camping permit. Per night you pay, but it's like a few dollars, and you can go online, just Google it, say I need to camp here, can I get my permit? And it's like online, $5 for your crew, and you camp there. And it's different regarding touching the animals. It's very different where you are. So it's the same rules everywhere, but they are much strictly enforced in the national parks.
Yeah,
so
that's definitely.
You don't take photos of yourself holding an animal in a national park and then post it online before you're out of Australia again.
Bad idea.
Don't do that.
Bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea. They're, especially in the national parks, they take it very, very serious.
Yeah, and he's 100% right. They definitely take it very, very seriously. And I definitely have pictures of me holding animals because I do. But number one, I'm not in a national park. And number two, I'm out of Australia. And number three, do I plan to go back to Australia? Absolutely. And I just don't think that it's going to be a problem. And if it is, then I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But I was under the impression that it was going to be super crazy leaving Australia. They're going to be, strip searching us and all this stuff. And it 100% was everyday normal. Here's my bag. It was very, very, there was nothing out of the ordinary. And I was with, one of my buddies who saw him is the knobtail.com. He's a very well-known knobtail breeder, at least in the US and in Europe. And I figured that we would be, and maybe they were watching us and they knew that we were just there to make some photos and make some videos and have a good time. And so they just let us go on our way. I don't know. But for the most part, you can 100% go herp and have a very enjoyable time. But as Valdemar said, and I've said, you just need to be mindful of what you're doing.
Yeah, and if you have stuff to catch reptiles with, like a snake hook, just say you're using it to flip over logs. That's what I used it for most of the time.
Yeah.
And they don't mind that at all.
Yeah, I mean, you can, guys, there's a lapids out here. I'm not going to put my hands under these logs. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah. It's a real thing. And Nicholas is asking if you're going to return to Australia so you can find Caphadactylus laevis.
Yeah, I mean, yes, if I do a Queensland trip, 100%. And I mean, my problem is I'm more of a desert guy. I'm very interested in the desert. I think I've been planning with a friend of mine, Bruce Edley, who actually lives in Australia right now. I think he lives in Brisbane. We've been talking about doing a kind of an Adelaide up to Uluru kind of trip. But then my buddy who saw him really wants to do Asper and do that whole kind of flying to Cairns and do Queensland trip. So yes, I do want to find Carphodactylus. I do want to find, the Phylurus and the Saltuarius and everything else that's up there.
You can find Asper and Carphodactylus within like 3 hours of each other.
Yeah, I think so.
I found them.
You found them pretty close.
Yeah.
How was Carphodactylus fairly easy to find? I feel like they have big eyes. You could eye shine the crap out of them, I'm sure.
You can eye shine them pretty big, but they're not common even in their habitat.
Yeah.
So we found 2, I think.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it was. So yeah, I mean, yes, my plan is to definitely do Queensland because there's a lot of species I want to see up there. There's a lot of Oedura that I want to see up there. There's a lot of everything I want to see up there. So the answer is yes, I will find a Carphodactylus in the wild. It's not, for some reason, it's not one of my favorite species, but they are impressive. I've actually imported them from Germany and they're massive. They're much bigger than I thought they would be. So I've held them and I've seen them, but in the wild would be a totally different story. So the answer to that is yes, I will go back and do a Queensland trip, or 1 or 2 or 5 trips.
Have you seen in real life Saltaurus?
Oh yeah, Saltaurus, yeah.
They dwarf the Carphodactylus in the wild.
Oh yeah, they do for sure. But I was just I was thinking that Carphodactylus were going to be a little smaller than they were, and I mean those are good size.
Geckos.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, the big Saltaurus are, I mean, the Cornutus and Celsubrosus are massive.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or the go-to places in Belize? I know Christian here, he wants to know. He's in his head planning an anole trip for the society right now.
Anoles in Belize?
Yeah.
I mean, it all depends on what species of anoles you want to see.
I think the exact species is all of them.
All of them. I mean, the great part about Belize is that it's a very small country, so you can get around that. I mean, if you spent 10 days in that country, you could do some real damage. But so there's some interesting species. There's a place called Pine Ridge, Belize, which it's very, I guess it's high altitude because it's actually like a pine forest. It's not even in the jungle. And there's some very interesting species up there. Down there's a place called Lamini where there's some ruins, and that's where I found the Drymarchon, which is the like a blacktail Cribo down there. There was some very interesting anoles down there. So there's another place called Black Rock Lodge. I mean, I could go on and on. So if you can message me and I can set you up for Belize big time, but there's some good spots up there. Close to the Guatemalan border, there's a place called Santa Elena. I believe it's Santa Elena. You can actually even cross into Guatemala and do Tikal, these big ruins. And there was some, I believe there's some crown anoles that live there. I'd have to check though. Like some Dactyloa, whatever they're calling them these days. But I need to look into that. But message me and we can talk about anoles.
Awesome. What are some other like little tidbits that really change how you would keep different animals? Like I have an example I like to use. So coming from Denmark, I was interested in Strophoreus, and most places I looked, people talked about keeping the same way. And then I went there and I found Chrysalis and Williamsi, a species that most people would keep exactly the same in captivity, and people think about them in the same way. Where I noticed they had totally different microhabitat. That the two areas I found them is very similar areas. Their habitat looks the same if you look at a picture of it, but I noticed that in those areas, the chrysalis would only choose to live on actual trees, like big trunks, like 20 centimeters across, like 4 inches across trees, which are far and few between in that area, where Williamsi would only live on shrubs, like little sticks as thin as themselves, despite in both areas, shrubs being present where chrysalis live and trees being present where Williamsi is. Is there any kind of that example you've seen?
I mean, yeah, there is like on every, literally like in almost every different species. I think one of the main things that I took away from kind of the Middle Eastern stuff, like, and I mentioned it in my talk, is the humidity in these Arabian countries blew me away. I mean, literally blew me away how humid it can be in like the Emirates and Oman. So like when you're keeping Teratoscincus, for example, the frog-eyed geckos, they should not be kept. It's actually, it's kind of a difficult thing to achieve because you don't have a giant terrarium, but they should be on a dry substrate, but it should be humid in there, it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
But just the levels of humidity that are in deserts kind of blew my mind. Just like, especially like I had said earlier about the Euromastics. I mean, these animals are living within a stone's throw of the ocean, and it is 80% humidity. And it just doesn't make sense, because if you go on some of these just ridiculous Facebook pages about Euromastics, everybody, oh, you can't bathe them because their tails are going to rot, and you can't have any humidity because they'll get like nasal polyps, or just some nonsense. And it's wrong. I mean, these animals are living in a very, very humid area. And so seeing that kind of changed how I kept Euromastics. And then like, yeah, last year was the first time I was able to breed Euromastics oscillata. So just kind of gleaning little bits of information like that, seeing how cold it can be in the habitat. I mean, there's been times where I've been out hunting like Tenepus and Chondrodactylus and stuff like that, where I go in, it's too cold, and there's still geckos and they're still out on the road, and it is super, super cold. And so, I mean, those are a lot of it. But then, yeah, I mean, some of the tiny little microhabitat stuff, like you were saying with Strophoreus, like with the species Strophoreus, like when you think Strophoreus, you always think, oh, they live in branches. Strophoreus, we found not a single Strophoreus ever other than on the ground. They were always on the ground. They were crawling around under bushes. They were crawling around on the road. It was crazy. So, I mean, you'll see stuff like that everywhere you go, especially if you really know a species and you've really kind of studied up on them and you keep them and you think you know everything about them. You will learn that you don't know everything about them. Hold on one sec. Yes, sweetie. Okay, I'll feed you in just a sec. Give me 10 minutes, okay? So yeah, that's it's just very, I mean, it's so cool because you kind of never know what you're going to learn. Like with that Moloch, you know, what do you think when you think of Moloch? You think red, dry, freaking wild, sandy, freaking outback tracks, right? And here I am, straight up wet, yellow farmland sand, almost in a city, and there's a flipping Moloch crossing the road. Like the last place literally the last place I expected to find one.
Interesting. I think some of what you talked about earlier is another observation that a local guy here, Nils Arnoldi, that works with chameleons in drier habitat, has also noticed. He started using foggers at night in his terrariums with fans, so the air didn't get stagnant and the substrate didn't get all moist, but to have moisture moving through the air in the habitat, despite it being desert species, basically, he was working with.
Yeah. I mean, is he keeping Namaquensis?
He keeps the European chameleon.
Oh, okay. So yeah, same thing. I mean, those guys are down like kind of along the Mediterranean, and I'm sure it's the same. There's a couple
desert, but you consider it quite dry.
Yeah, it's that whole kind of Spanish, like that whole and there's a few chameleons like that. There's Bradypodium occidentale, which I've seen living right on the coast, and it's the same thing at night. That fog rolls in, and it's the same thing with Cameleo namaquensis and with Cameleo. It's that weird. That's one of the most difficult things to achieve in captivity, is that relative air humidity without soaking the cage.
Yeah.
Because some animals, Europlatus or Phelsuma or something like that, you can just blast the cage and just spray the whole thing down. But if you have a desert chameleon, they don't want to be wet. Not generally they don't want you blasting the cage every day, but they need that humidity. So that's another thing that field herping will do, is it will present very big challenges for you to try to mimic what you've seen in the wild now and try to make that happen in captivity, because sometimes it's not easy, like what we're talking about right now, making a humid desert. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially in small terrariums.
Yeah, big time, for sure.
So when did this YouTube thing start for you? When did you start thinking that people should know about your field herping?
The YouTube thing, what did it start in 2019, I think, or 2018? I can't really remember. Honestly, I did like 2 or 3 trips to Oman with my cameras, came back, saw the footage, and was like, I mean, I've wanted to, like, way back, like in 2006, going to South Africa with a camcorder. We used to kind of just take some footage of some of the animals, and we were like, oh, we're going to put together like a videographic guide to the geckos of South Africa. And then that just kind of fell apart. And then I was just, I'll sit on the TV, I'll sit on the couch and zone out. I'll have my daughter, she'll be watching the iPad or playing with her toys, and I'll be like wanting to see field herping. And all the field herping channels I go to were just like, they were just either very, very difficult to find good ones because there were just very small channels, or the big ones were just trash, just garbage. And I was like, man, I like to watch field herping. I like to just watch dudes finding freaking lizards, or chicks finding lizards or snakes. And I was like, fuck, I'll make them. Like, I'll just do it for myself. And that way, in 20 years, I can watch them, or my daughter can be like, whoa, look what daddy did. There's daddy and mama in freaking the Middle East. Like, this is crazy. And so finally, when I went down to Ecuador, I did it. And it was a freaking task, man, to try to learn how to edit and to learn how to film, because I do photography. I don't film. And it's not, dude, it's honestly, it's not that fun, man. I'm kind of torn. It's hard to explain it. It's a big chore to be out there field herping, and when you find something, not just to be able to just be stoked in the moment and find it and trip out and be all like psyched with your friends and just be like, oh, look what we found. I got to have the camera and be like sort of charismatic and like it sucks, actually. I mean, I'm glad I've done it, because now I can watch my videos and be like, that's cool, man, I like this. But it's a pain, dude. You got to lug this giant bag with all this stuff around constantly. You're like, hold on, guys, like, let me get my camera. When we find something, it's like, wait, let me get the camera. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad. Not bad, but just annoyances, man. I feel like it takes a little bit away from herping. But at the same time,
that at least appreciate you doing it.
I mean, yeah, that's like, I'm stoked that people are like enjoying my videos. Like for the, like, I'd say 99% of the comments and the criticism I get, it's all good and constructive. Every now and again, you get some knucklehead that just says stupid shit. But other than that, like, that's been great. And I mean, and now that I'm kind of removed from like my earlier videos, like my Oman videos and stuff, even though they're pretty cringy, like the editing's bad and it's just shaky footage, I can still watch them and be like, hell yeah, I like this. This is cool. So I'm going to keep doing them. I mean, I know it's been a while since I put one up. I'm going to kind of do an update video this weekend. And then, like I said, I've got I got a Baja trip at the beginning of May where that should be like a legit real, the start of another, series. And then after that, we're going to do West Texas. Hopefully do I don't know if it'll happen this year, but maybe like in November. I want to go down to Chile because I'm very, very interested in the lizards down there, Pristodactylus, Leolamus, Diplolamus, all that stuff. So I want to do a trip down there, but we have to play it by ear. I'm actually moving from Los Angeles, which is in Southern California, back up to where I grew up, which is in Santa Cruz, which is more in Northern California. So that's going to be kind of a chore, but it should be good.
New hunting grounds.
New hunting grounds for sure. New hunting grounds. So yeah, there's actually Dicamptodon, which is the Pacific giant salamander up there. There's rubber boas. There's Zonata, which are the mountain king snakes, Algaria, a couple species of Algaria. So it'll be rad. It's going to be good.
Good. Where do you want to take your hobby? What's the dream both for field herping, what you keep yourself, and your little YouTube?
The dream would be to be to balance everything, man, and have time for everything. Luckily, I've been, during all of this stuff, I also work. I work a full-time job. I'm like a totally normal person. I'm not like paid to do any of this. This is all coming out of my pocket. I go to work every day, just like everybody else does. And my wife has been in her master's degree for marriage and family therapy. So once she's done, or no, she is done. So now it's hopefully going to be my turn to kind of chill out a little bit in terms of like the financials, because she's going to be making good money where she's doing. So I'm not going to have to be the breadwinner anymore. So hopefully I can not work full time, focus more on my reptiles, my videos, have at least a couple of trips scheduled a year. And honestly, I don't really have like an ultimate goal for it. I just want to keep going with it. I'm not like the type of dude who's like, oh, I want 10,000 subscribers and I want to get paid. And like, I want to be able to breed my animals, man, and just go see the world and spend time with my family and not kill myself doing a job that I don't enjoy doing. That's kind of my deal. I mean, I guess if somebody was like, hey, can we pay you to just have you feed your lizards and go on little trips or whatever, I'd be like, hell yeah. But I don't know. I don't want to, this isn't something that I'm trying to do to like get paid or become some like YouTube sensation or something. It's not at all. Like if that happened, then I guess that would happen, but I don't think it will. And it's not something that I'm shooting for. I just want to make dope videos that everybody can watch and be stoked on. And my daughter can see in 20 years and be like, that's super cool that you filmed that.
But I can at least hear that you're agreeing to be our guide if we pay you in the association if we ever go out.
I will, man, straight up. I would love to. I'd be totally down.
Another question I have is something I think a lot of people is wondering there, like what is keeping them from going maybe. That is, how do you get in contact with local people that can like show you where to go? Finding local people.
I mean, the quick answer to that is I don't ever. I never have. Not one time have I ever gotten in touch with anybody local that showed me anything ever. I do all the research at home. Like I said, Google Earth, field guides, iNaturalist, PDFs, ResearchGate, I think it's called. I mean, you have every single piece of information that you need right at your fingertips on the internet. And that's just how I've done it. I'm not even joking when I say this. I have never connected with anybody local in the country that I'm going to help show me reptiles ever. And so don't let that hold you back, because That's irrelevant. You don't need to do that. If you have somebody in the country that's into herping and they want to take you out, by all means, take advantage of it. But don't make that be something that's like, oh, well, I really want to go, but I don't know anybody there. That doesn't matter. I've never done that.
I think that's a good message
Go grab
for
your...
the viewers.
What's that? Sorry.
I think that's a good message for our viewers, that they don't need that help.
No, you don't. You've got everything.
Study and get that
I mean,
yourself.
You've got everything. You need a field guide. I mean, sure. So there's some countries where you kind of have to, like, they just make it a little bit difficult, like Madagascar for conversation's sake. You can't rent your own car. You have to have a driver, which makes it a pain in the ass. And hang on one sec, guys. Okay. Got to grab my daughter some crackers. I will be right back. 1 second.
Perfect.
Come here, sweetie. Come here. So, like Madagascar, you can't drive your own car. And that to me is a big deal. And you know what? I actually take back what I said a minute ago. When we went to Ecuador, we had guides. That wasn't something that I wanted to do, but it was just the way that it was set up. And those were friends of mine, and I met them on the internet. And it wasn't really like having guides, because they were friends. And so when we got there, it was just like kind of herping with friends. And that's kind of why I'd forgotten that, yes, those guys are guides. And so you can use things like that if you want to, and if that stuff is available to you. Like, so if you wanted to go to Ecuador, these guys, they're called tropical herping. There's another guy his name's Jaime, who also does tours down there. And there's another of my friends named Sebastian, who, if you guys are interested, you can message me and I can send you their contacts. But so those kind of guys, they're great. You're going to have to pay them money, which I don't like. But sometimes, it's like I said, there's some countries that kind of you might want to take that kind of like opportunity if it's available to you. Madagascar, there's a lot of weird national park issues and just strange things going down there. I'm sure some of you guys know the whole story way back in the day with Obst and Sipe and those guys. One guy got shot and killed. Sipe was out in the jungle for 4 days hiding. There's sketchy stuff goes down sometimes. So, but like I said earlier, apart from the Ecuador trip, man, I go on my own. I come prepared with my knowledge and my field guide and my maps, and I'm ready to go. And it's always worked. I mean, you're not looking for diamonds, you're looking for reptiles, and they live there. So you put yourself in the habitat, you find the micro habitat, you time everything as best as you can, and you're setting yourself up for success. So chances are you're going to find most of what you're looking for.
Awesome. I think we're going to wrap up now, Frank.
Cool.
I would like to say thank you for doing this talk.
Thank you guys.
You'll stick around a little bit after we close the stream, so we can talk a little bit afterwards, just a couple of minutes.
Cool.
But thank you everyone for tuning in. I think it was a success.
Thank you guys for coming and listening. I really appreciate it. All the questions were great, and I hope to see you guys or talk to you guys soon.
Bye, guys.